Right, Chelsea fans, Pochettino's done. He's coming. It's finally been announced. I'm buzzing that this is done because it's been up in the air for so long and I was thinking it's getting so bad at Chelsea, this bloke doesn't fancy it. But it's done. It's officially announced. Pochettino's in. I don't think he's going to take us to the heights of Tuchel yet. But he will be a massive improvement on Potter, on Lampard, and it'll also be a massive improvement on bringing younger players through because that is something that he identifies early on. And the other thing, which I cannot wait to see, is he's a disciplinarian. Okay, he's strict. He makes his players work, and he will set standards at Chelsea again. And Lampard has been so vocal, especially in his last few press conferences, that the standards at Chelsea are non-existent and they've dropped. We've got players falling asleep, missing the team bus for a nap. It's a disaster at Chelsea Football Club right now, and Lampard wasn't there long enough to make a change. He was there to steady the ship and take the hits from the fans, and because the board didn't want it anymore. Hence why Todd Boehly didn't turn up to the last game. Right? The board didn't want to be there because they knew they'd be in for some stick because of what a shambles this season has been. However, we're not here to talk about the board. We're here to talk about Pochettino becoming Chelsea's new manager and what that means for the club. And I've been waiting to make this video because I'll be honest with you, I wasn't sure about Poch. When the likes of Nagelsmann and Enrique were being mentioned, Poch wasn't my number one. But since we found out that those managers obviously didn't want to be at Chelsea Football Club, probably because of the board. And then we saw that Nagelsmann also didn't want to be at Tottenham as well. And it sounds like there's a lot of baggage around Nagelsmann. Pochettino was the next option. It was quiet. He'd impressed in interviews before. There is proof that he's done well before. Not amazing, not to the level everyone hypes him up to. But there is genuine proof that Pochettino's a good manager. And the one stat that I've looked at a lot recently is the difference that Pochettino makes to a team in their running stats. It is quite phenomenal. I was looking at the interview on Sky Sports Monday Night Football from a few years back, I think during COVID. When he left Southampton, they were the number one distance covered by kilometres in the league, in the Premier League. Number one, like by a long way, 6k I think it was the difference. And bottom of the league was Spurs. Like flat out bottom with a big gap to the bottom as well. And Pochettino went in there and took Tottenham all the way to the top of that table as well. He transformed Tottenham Hotspur. He said he inherited players with some bad habits and stuff like that. And it just sounds a bit like Chelsea this season. And hopefully we've nipped it in the bud nice and quick. And it's not been as drastic as the situation is over at Tottenham. So that sounds good. I'm intrigued by how he's going to do it. But hopefully Chelsea Football Club will start moving in the right direction and set standards and set examples of what it is to be at the very, very top. And Raheem Sterling's even come out and said that it sounds like a good idea. We need someone in charge. And that obviously shows that the players had the rule over Graham Potter. I don't know so much over Lampard, but I think Lampard also thought that he wasn't going to be there long enough. And he knew the future of the club wasn't in his hands. He knew that it didn't really matter what he did because he couldn't make a difference. The players were going to be there longer than Lampard. Ultimately, that's worked out. That's exactly what's happened. So, I'm intrigued to see what happens. And the first big thing we need to talk about with Pochettino is Joao Felix. He's turned round, first day pretty much on the job after being announced and gone, yeah, I don't want Joao Felix. Now, that might shock some Chelsea fans. And in fact, it has. Because if you go on Twitter and you listen to the Twitter spaces and you listen to what the journalists are saying, and you just read like the Twitter timeline, it's like Poch out already after one day. One thing I will say is, wow, how times have changed at Chelsea Football Club. Absolutely, some parts of the fan base have fallen in love with a lone player. Now, don't get me wrong, Joao Felix is a very, very good footballer, technically very gifted. Question marks over his game, yes. Question marks over his attitude, a little bit. But a very, very good player. And he has got something that only the very best players in the best teams have. But there's something not quite there that means he's not at that level yet. Right? And I think that's probably fair to say that 1 goal in 4 games on average is probably that reason if you're playing as a forward. But there are times when Joao Felix gets the ball, moves with it like Messi, puts the ball through people's legs like Hazard, this guy can finish like some of the best strikers in the world, and then all of a sudden, he looks horrific in front of goal. But there's something there with Joao Felix, and it did shock me when I read that, because I did think another loan probably sounds like the most sensible option here. But Pochettino's looked at it. He's gone, I want a small squad, and I've got Nkunku coming in. Why do I need Joao Felix? He probably doesn't suit how I'm going to play. He's told the board. The board have respected it. Off goes Joao Felix, when apparently everyone on the board at Chelsea wanted to sign him. I love to hear that. Because straight away, Poch isn't being a yes man. Because you all know that if Graham Potter was here, Felix would be staying. And he'd just be filling up the squad. And we'd probably be sat on 30 players in the squad going into next season as well. So I like that. Disciplinarian, not a yes man, and telling the board exactly how it is. These are good starts for Pochettino in my eyes. As much as I think there are worse players at Chelsea than Joao Felix, I like what he's done there. We don't own him. He's gone, come on, get rid. We don't own him. We're not in control of this player. Unless we're going to pay some astronomical fee, it's not worth it. We can go and spend the money that Joao Felix is going to cost, put it towards a striker, and change Chelsea's outlook on the whole season. If we bring in a striker that we know will score goals, our season next year will look completely different to this season, because for the last even 2 seasons, not scoring goals has been our biggest problem. But Pochettino has started well. I'm intrigued by this. I'm impressed. And it looks good. It looks bright. Arguably, another thing to talk about here is that with Pochettino saying that he doesn't want Joao Felix, I'm hearing and I'm seeing and I'm reading that apparently Pochettino is making his opinions heard that he wants Mason Mount to stay. And that is music to my ears. I'm seeing people talking about Mason Mount, and we could get 60 million for him, and he's our most sellable asset. Now look, he probably is. And there would be a demand for Mason Mount because he's that good. He is that good. Mason Mount is a player that not only is he homegrown, which obviously inflates the price, he's a very good player. He can play in a number of positions. And ultimately, when things are going well for Mason Mount, he puts up good numbers as well. Now, probably the last season and a half for Mason Mount, it's not been amazing. I think he'd admit that himself. He's had injuries, he's had struggles, he's had contract issues. It's all a bit ridiculous, to be honest with you. But Mason Mount has been there throughout the transfer ban. He's been there throughout all this time with the club changing ownership and everything. And he loves Chelsea Football Club. And I really do think that if Chelsea Football Club gave Mason Mount the contract that he desires, then Mason Mount would sign the deal. I watched him the other day walking around, and he doesn't look like a player that wants to go. The players that wants to go, they don't care. They didn't even look at the fans. Mason Mount almost couldn't say goodbye because it was going to hurt him too much. And it isn't definite with Mount yet, right? It's not definite. We could end up holding him to his contract and letting him go. But I think Pochettino is going to do his best to keep Mason Mount. And that makes me happy because I would rather that we keep Mason Mount. I don't want to see him go. I really don't. I don't want to see Mount go because I think it says so much about Chelsea. It says so much about what the new board think about Cobham. They don't care. They'd rather spend 80 million on Mudryk, who doesn't do anything. When you could spend 80 million on money to improve the academy, bring in sensible players elsewhere, and give Mason Mount the money that he wants. And albeit Mason Mount probably is asking for more money than what he has arguably done in the season when his contract's going to be on the line of being renewed. But there are players at Chelsea Football Club that cost way more than Mason Mount, are on way more than Mason Mount, and it just seems ridiculous. Say we get 55 million for Mason Mount, we can't then spend an extra, say Mason Mount's on 80 grand a week, we need to spend an extra, say, 120 to 150 grand a week on Mason Mount improving his deal, which I think would be fair because Raheem Sterling's on 300 grand a week and he got 9 goals this season. So Mason Mount should be fit. Arguably, if Mason Mount was fit, I think you'd be expected to see him somewhere in the range of 7 to 12 goals in a season as well. So Mason Mount should be arguably on the same money as Sterling. Now, you could argue that Sterling hasn't performed to the levels that he should have and should have scored more than 9 goals, which I think is fair to say, and he'd agree as well. But there are players at Chelsea Football Club that are on far more money than Mason Mount and do far less. And they've had far more time this season to prove that they could do more. And I know I'm kind of going around the houses here, but Mason Mount is probably asking for more money than his current form warranted. But we've seen what Mason Mount can do before. He's homegrown, so if we want to replace him with a homegrown player, already the transfer fee's inflated. We won't sign a player as good as Mason Mount for less money who's homegrown. We won't. That won't happen, and we'll end up spending more on wages as well. And then, going forward, if we want to bring someone in internationally, one, they're not proven. Two, they'll end up on more money than what Mount's on right now. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think it's such a mess. Mason Mount should be wrapped up, agreed, and kept at Chelsea, because if Liverpool, United, Bayern Munich, whoever else, Arsenal all want him, then actually Chelsea Football Club need to look at this and go, hang on, those three of those teams are in the Champions League next season. They're the best teams in England, and Bayern Munich, the best team in Germany, want him. Continuous winners as well. It just seems like a ridiculous decision to not just give him a bit of extra money when some players are on ridiculous wages already at Chelsea. And I know they want that to change. And I know he's probably not worth what Reece is worth, because if Reece was fit all the time, he's indispensable. But arguably, Mason Mount hasn't ever really struggled with injuries until the last few months. And it seems like it's been an ongoing one. So I think Mason Mount, for the consistency and the levels of performance that he gives and his versatility, is worth a good enough increase on his current deal. But look, hopefully Pochettino can make that heard and Mason Mount stays at Chelsea Football Club, because I don't want to see him joining a rival. I really, really don't. And I actually think that Mason Mount is a proper Pochettino type of player. I think I can see him fit in the system. High pressing, high working, technically very good. I don't think Mason Mount's future is as an 8 though. And if that's where he wants to go and wants to join up with Liverpool and Man United and play in that midfield role, that Ten Hag's playing his 10s in a midfield role this season as well, if that's where Mason Mount sees himself, then actually I'm not sure that position will be available under Pochettino. But I think in and around as a number 10 or just playing off the striker out wide if needed, I think that position would be there under Pochettino for Mason Mount, and I kind of hope that would work out. But look, Pochettino's made a start at Chelsea. It looks like he's been on the phone to Ugarte. He's told the board he doesn't want Felix, and he's already telling them he wants Mount to stay. And I like that, because he's kind of telling the board what he wants. And it's a bit old-fashioned, and it's good to hear that, because you see a lot of managers, they don't want to interact with the board. They go, oh, let the board do it. Let the board sign the players. I'll just manage. I like how Pochettino started. Welcome to Chelsea, Mauricio Pochettino. You don't start till July the 1st, but I'm hearing you're already doing stuff in the background. But it'll be on the pitch, on the training pitch and stuff like that, getting ready for pre-season tour. I'm excited to see what happens. Like the video, subscribe if you're new, and let me know what you think of Pochettino down in the comments in a bit.